Hello and welcome to the Young Film Academy podcast, the essential podcast for teenagers looking to find their way into the creative industries. My name is Dan Allen. I'm sadly not joined by Ellen Thomas this week, but I am very excited to be spending the next hour or so talking to Eleri Jones. Now, Eleri actually used to teach the acting program at the Young Film Academy's residential summer camp, but she is now one of the directors on Hollyoaks, which is amazing. We haven't spoken to anyone in the world of soaps yet on the podcast, so I am so excited to not only catch up with an amazing human being, but also find out about her experience. Eleri has, like I said, she's directed so many episodes of Hollyoaks already. She also has loads of experience working in theatre directing, also in films as well, also as an AD and as an actor. So a super experienced person who is going to demystify the world of what it's like working in soaps. So without any further ado, welcome to the podcast, Eleri. How's it going?
Hello. Good, thank you. Really good to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're very excited. Well, I'm very excited. Ellen, sadly, not with us today. But I can't wait to talk to you. Obviously, we've known each other a little while, and it's been so exciting sort of seeing your journey and how it's progressed in the world of sort of soaps. And I wondered if you could sort of start by I really wondered what that first day on set was like as a director and how you felt, what was the experience. Because I mean, everyone's first day in TV can be different, right? But it's directing such a big role. How did you find that going in? Did they look after you, like, or were they just like did you feel all eyes just on you, you know?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you so much for saying that, by the way. I feel exactly the same about you and watching all your amazing work developing over the last few years. It's been so cool. Yeah, I mean, I was really lucky because I had always wanted to work in TV as a director, and I'd worked alongside kind of a varied sort of career history that we can go into at some point if you want, although it's just very factual. But in terms of kind of moving on a journey from acting to directing and then moving on a journey from theatre to screen as well, that was kind of how the last sort of 10 years have played out for me. And I was very lucky because an opportunity came up through Directors UK to take part in, apply for a scheme to help theatre directors transitioning into screen. I'd worked quite a lot in screen as an actor and as an AD, and I was really familiar with the process, but I was also kind of really mainly directing theatre at the time this scheme came up. So I applied for this scheme, and there was like quite a few rounds to it. But it's one of those things, obviously, we all do these schemes. Most of them you never get anything out of and you never hear anything back from. And I just kind of kept getting through the rounds and was like, how am I doing this? Just kind of kept having conversations with lovely people and being like, oh, this would be great. And then just not really thinking it would kind of ever go anywhere. And then there were 4 directors selected to come to Lime Pictures to do a 2-day workshop with Sean Glynn, who's a really amazing, incredible, experienced director who's worked in telly for, I won't tell you how long because he'll get upset if he hears this and it'll reveal his age, but he was amazing, and we had to basically, they put us through our paces effectively as like a director's audition in some sort of way, so we all had to shoot the same scene with the same cast, and then we would go into the edit process. It was kind of a condensed version of kind of an episode, just looking at one scene in particular. So we shot the scene, blocked the scene, shot the scene, full crew, and then we went into the edit process, and then we reviewed it with the executives to sort of... Yeah, go for it. Cut me off.
No. I was just wondering, like, that process of you're all doing the same scene, did it feel like a competition? Did you feel like you needed to do something? Like, did you... Because I think you can very easily get into your own head and start overthinking it. Like, I need to be overly creative in a way, but then you can get in your own way when actually what you need to do is just tell the story. And how did that even go in that moment? Did some people actually overthink it? Like, were you calling all the shots as well? Like, what was that process like?
Yeah, it's a really great question, actually. It was a fascinating process, and I think the way that I approached it, so it was 2 days of workshops. And so basically, as obviously people are going in one by one to do the scenes, we're also going to set to visit other directors and meet them and kind of just do other things at the same time. So I was actually last up to go and do the scene with the actors. So by the time I got there, they'd done it 3 times already.
Yeah. Had you watched the director's work as well?
No, not at all. So it's completely kind of like anonymous. So I was somewhere else doing something else. And then basically I came in to do this scene with the guys. And obviously they'd done 3 versions of it already.
Yeah.
So I guess that played a part in how I was approaching it and thinking about it, because I was thinking, you know, they already know what the scene's about, so I don't need to waste time. Also, we only had an hour. It's worth saying that, because that was part of the challenge. Obviously, as is the case when we're shooting for real, I think part of the challenge was, can you complete a scene in an hour? And it wasn't a complicated scene. It was a 3-hander, but obviously you need shots on everybody, coverage of everybody. And I think the way I approached it was to just exactly what you said, keep it simple, think, what's this scene about? It's about the dynamic mainly between these 2 people. And then you've got a 3rd character who's serving that kind of chipping in little sister role, I think it was at the time. And I thought, I think because of my experience as an AD, I'd lent into understanding, and an actor as well, I'd understood kind of blocking for TV being obviously very different than for stage. And I think if you're coming from a stage directing background, that's kind of one of the big transitions, is how small the area is that you need to work in, because you don't want to spend 5 minutes watching somebody walk across a room on camera, very dull. So you know, kind of thinking about sort of keeping it concise and truncated, and thinking, okay, so that blocking where, you know, if that person walks forward, they can turn and it can become a 2 shot, so you get 2 shots out of 1. So it's thinking about like the value of shots. I was thinking about that, because I knew the time was a big factor. And I think I just tried to tell the story of the scene and not overcomplicate it, and bear in mind the house style that I knew I was trying to replicate, rather than, I think there's a temptation to do something like directorially really interesting and quirky. But actually, that's not what you're trying to get in
camera
that.
twirling, coming down. It's like, it serves no value.
Exactly that. Contra zoom right in the face. No, but it was kind of, it felt to me like, I think in hindsight, that was a good decision, because actually I was just sort of subconsciously thinking, well, you know, I'm not trying to show my best directing work in terms of camera shots and interest. I'm trying to make the show, to show that I can make this show, and I know what this show looks like and feels like. So for me, I went towards it from that kind of perspective, and I think that was huge. But also, coming back to kind of the question that you asked, I think what was really fascinating about that, I then managed to get the job, by the way. That was good. So
congratulations.
Thank you so much. And I ended up doing 2 split blocks. So when it was 5 episodes a week, I did 2 episodes, and Sean, the mentor, did 3, so that I was watching him working, then I would go and do a scene of my own, then I would kind of go back to that. And I think what was just so incredible about Hollyoaks, and you know, anybody who's worked there will tell you this about the crew and the environment, but it's really scary learning in front of people on the job, because they all know what they're doing and they've been doing it for years, and so you can feel a bit floundery and like, how do I, you know, do this in front of people? It's my first time directing on a big set. And I think that was it was such a positive and supportive environment. Everybody worked together. If I was saying like, this is what I'm imagining, but I'm not quite sure, how would we then cut that together? You know, people would just help you and talk to you and talk you through the options, and then you can make clear decisions. And it was just the best possible environment to learn in. I was very, very lucky.
That's amazing. Yeah, because I think that's the thing. It's like, if you go in trying to be some kind of tyrant, but you still haven't figured everything out, or you're still learning, I think that's when you're going to lose the crew and they're going to get frustrated, is you're saying, we're doing it this way. Even if you need that support, like if you open that up and invite your collaborators, because that's what they're there to do, is to collaborate. Like if you invite them into that process, I think you're going to get like the best out of them. Is that what you found across the sort of with camera department? Because I imagine, you know, I mean, it's crazy to think, I mean, this happens in film and TV. The director is so often the least experienced person in terms of number of projects and number of like on-set hours. But is the cinematographer generally like very like your main collaborator, and were they helpful in that way, would you say?
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly how I felt, and also how I still feel now, 3 years on. You know, it's still the same conversations that we have, where I'm like, right, I've got this idea. Maybe I'm kind of a bit braver with my ideas now, but in terms of kind of how we best make something happen. I think in general, I think that comes down to leadership, which I think I already had kind of going into the process, which was helpful because I was able to kind of understand that actually to get the best out of everybody around you, you invite them into the process, you give them a voice in the room, you work, and then ultimately you make the overall decision about how you're going to proceed. But I think thrashing out ideas with other creative minds is kind of whatever the project is. That's kind of the best way for me to approach it, because I sort of don't sit in that position where I think, oh, well, my idea is obviously the best idea because I'm the director. It's kind of, it's just more like, okay, I've had this idea, this is what I'm envisaging. And they might say, well, there's a better way to do that because, we could start off over here and then bring them, all that kind of nitty gritty, which I think is, it just makes such a difference when you've got people who are working in a spirit of generosity. And I think if you're open to that as a director, you'll also make really great stuff with great people because they know so much. Yes,
gotcha. So you mentioned this split block. How does the block system work normally? Is it normally between multiple directors who will share a block, or do you get a whole block? How does that process go?
Yeah, so it's gone down to 3 episodes a week now, which I think has made everything more concise, the storytelling, and kind of, I think, just trying to generate 5 episodes. We had 5 units shooting at a time at the studios, and it's just such a huge amount of content for the script department. And I think actually the storytelling's a lot clearer now that it's 3 episodes a week. So you get given 3 episodes to direct, basically. And the kind of dream is that you obviously are able to put your own slant on it a little bit, but it still sits within the house style, so that if you're watching week to week, there's not something super disruptive where everybody's suddenly doing something completely visually different to the style that the show is made in.
We're going shaky cam and long pauses.
And there are moments for that stuff that's totally dictated by the content of the script and the scenes. And, that we do use handheld, we do use Steadicam, we do use those things, but it's just about employing them in a way that makes sense rather than just for the sake of style over substance. So that's how it works currently, is that you direct 3 episodes, and they would typically air Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in a week. So that your style and your episodes sort of sit together, and then the next week will be a different director. But you've kind of possibly got 2 or 3 units working simultaneously at the studios.
Yes, gotcha. So obviously it was 5 episodes when you just started, and that was with your mentor that you got to shadow, and then was he there on set as well for your shoot days as well, so he could sort of that sounds really nice to sort of help you into that process.
It was incredible. I was very lucky to have someone who empowered me to make those decisions and to have that voice, and was there to kind of lean on when I needed to lean on somebody, but also to not take over and be, obviously everybody knows them as a really, knows Sean as a really experienced lead director on the show. So it was, obviously sometimes the crew would turn to him and say, what do you want for this scene? And he'd look at me and go, well, what do you want as your scene? So amazing. Somebody who's able to redirect the focus and empower me to come into that environment, particularly, as a young woman as well. And kind of obviously, that there's gender balance in crews mostly now, hopefully in some ways, but also that is still stepping into the director's shoes as a woman who's younger than everybody, is a challenge. And I think that process was really eased by Sean's supportive nature and the way that he kind of empowered me to find the right choices rather than just be like, oh, well, you should do it like this,
Yeah, amazing. You mentioned when you did the test scene that it was that you had an hour, and you said that that's actually similar to how it goes on the actual day. So what are the timings? How many scenes are you doing a day? How long is that an hour to direct it and shoot it, or is it an hour to direct it and then you have a shoot time? What's sort of the timings?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think the timings are probably getting less and less every day for TV as budgets get squeezed and move forward. But I think, basically, I mean, Hollyoaks is single camera mostly. You get an allowance of a couple of 2 camera days within a block, so you can choose where best to allocate those. So if you've got a big party scene where you're going to be picking up loads of B-roll as well, you might choose that as your 2 camera day so that you can get more coverage out of the stuff you're shooting. But mostly it's single camera, whereas a lot of the other continuing dramas are multicam, so that's obviously a very different setup. So I think typically we'd shoot between 5 and 6 scenes a day.
Wow.
Yeah, which is quite big, in terms of, as you say, that hour is absolutely, you arrive on the set, you maybe have a quick chat with your HODs about where you're going to block the scene effectively, which area it's going to take place in, which way you might want to look first, so that the lighting team can start working on that. But that hour or hour and a half typically for most scenes is inclusive of then the cast arrive, then you rehearse the scene, then you block the scene, then you show the scene to the crew, then you talk them through the shots, then you shoot it, and you're out of there in an hour and a half. So it's extremely fast.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's, I mean, for those that don't know, that is very tight, right? Like, I mean, ideally on like a feature, you might be trying to get, I mean, sometimes seconds of content a day, but that's sort of on higher budget. But certainly, not that many scenes a day, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It'd be like maybe a couple of scenes.
I think so. It's a different way of shooting. It's a more economical way of shooting. And I think, really that's where the planning comes into its own, because you have to be there with your plan. There's some time for discussion, like we were talking about collaboration and kind of working out the best way to do something. But really that's like a 2.5 minute conversation, because that's, otherwise if you spend 20 minutes discussing the scene, you've lost 5 shots because you could have done that in that time, or, whatever that is. So maybe not 5, but it's kind of, that's part of the ongoing challenge there. And I think even just, some locations are quicker than others. You sometimes go outside into the village in Hollyoaks and you've got planes flying over, you've got external factors that slow that down as well. So it's also, you're always up against schedule. But luckily the first AD, obviously the first ADs there are amazing, and they just kind of keep you on track and sort of go, how are you thinking? You might have to reassess your shooting plan halfway through the scene. If you're not going to get the shots you want, you're going to have to reassess and think, how am I going to cover what's there? So it's a constant process of adapting, rethinking. And I think that's why I enjoy it so much, is because it's moment to moment. It's never dull,
Yeah, no, 100%. Literally, I was thinking about that. Like, it was actually one of my questions I have down is about whether, because it's TV and they work with sets. You guys work with sets, don't you?
Yeah, exactly that.
And I wondered whether, because it was a more controlled environment most of the time, whether less things went wrong. Is that the case? Because I know you've done like narrative, like films as well. Would you say things go wrong less in soaps than on like film sets?
I think different things go wrong. I think it's a mixture, because sometimes, on some blocks you'll have a location shoot as well. So you'll be going out to somewhere outside of the village as characters go to a church, a garden centre, whatever. So you usually do some work on location as well. But mostly in the set, it's kind of different things. I mean, it could literally be somebody walks onto your set and obviously everything's quiet, so they don't think anyone's shooting in there. They just literally walk right into the middle of the scene. And you're like, okay, no worries, we'll do that one again then. But it's, it's just different stuff. There's different noise. So somebody might be constructing another set in a different part of the building, because obviously all the sets back onto each other. So you could walk through the door of the hospital into the Malik's flat, for example. So in reality, they're all very close to each other. So even though you're working, usually the scheduling allows that you're not next to any other crews. Sometimes it just means that you are backing onto another crew, so that you can be kind of having to share that shoot time as well. So they might say, guys, we just really need quiet for 5 minutes while we just get this really quiet bit, and we all have to stop and wait, and vice versa, So I think it's kind of a different negotiation. You're not encountering the public, which obviously when you're shooting on location, that can be something that slows everything down. But I just think you're navigating different challenges.
Yeah, I was going to say that reminds me of summer camp a little bit, where you got multiple shoots happening at once. So you're like, shh, we just need to get this.
I've booked that gun from the prop store. I need that. It's literally, it's not that different.
Wow, that's so fun. No, I mean, there's always complications, right? And as you were saying, with like planes overhead and stuff, it would just like ruin sound for ages and everything. I wonder, when you have that sort of like limitation on time, has it taught you to be more precise with your direction? Has it changed the way you speak to actors? What are your sort of big takeaways with being efficient? Because I imagine there's not really wiggle room to try many different things with the actors. So does it have to be a certain way? Do you still let them feed in if there ever was a chance for them to feed in? Like, how does that work with the acting side of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think in my experience, it's different to working on film where you've got more time. I think how I tend to try and approach it, and I think how the actors are used to working, because that, the great thing about continuing drama is that they're doing this day in, day out, so that muscle is just so trained. They're really on it. They know their lines. That everybody's kind of approaching it with the same level of efficiency, which is really helpful. But I think what I've kind of learned to do is anything that's kind of a character discussion. We might be talking about where you've just been, because obviously the big challenge, one of the big challenges for the actors is they might have come off another unit just now where they were shooting a scene that doesn't happen until the week after our scene. So they're shooting really, really out of sequence, which obviously we do normally, but they're jumping backwards and forwards in time for their characters.
Yeah.
So we often have a quick discussion about where you've just come from, when was the last time we saw you on screen, where you're going after this, so that they can plot that emotional journey for themselves as well. But I think I've kind of learnt to condense all of that conversation into our blocking and rehearsing time, so that when we actually start shooting, I might be making small adjustments, but I wouldn't necessarily be asking anybody to play something completely differently, unless I'm seeing it on screen and going, oh, actually, I've had an idea and I'm going to introduce it now. But I think typically I try and use that scene before we're shooting, to be able to kind of thrash out those conversations, so that then when we get to shoot, it's kind of straightforward and we're ticking off the list.
And just that process of working with the actors, is the blocking generally, you've got that all planned out and you just tell them what it is? Do they feed into the blocking much? Because obviously some of them have been playing these characters for how many years? Do you know what I mean?
30. Yeah.
It's crazy. That's crazy.
It's bad, isn't it?
Yeah. So, and then even collaborating with them and guide, how do you guide someone that knows that character inside out,
Yeah, and I think, that is one of the really interesting challenges for a director, because I think, coming off the back of working in theatre and even just other jobs where you kind of feel like you're the person who, or maybe want to feel like you're the person who has the best grasp of the world and the characters, and that you're not helping the actors navigate, but sometimes they're helping you navigate on continuing drama, because they're going, well, this line doesn't work because 3 years ago I had a storyline about X, Y, and Z, so this doesn't play. And that's just something that, because the writers and directors are all freelance, we're tapping in and out of people's stories, so it's quite easy for something to get kind of missed. But that's why the actors are such an incredible source of information, because they hold their whole journey. And it's kind of, it's an interesting question about blocking. I think it really depends on the scene. I always go in with a plan, but then sometimes, just like with anything, you might see an opportunity to do something better. You might go, oh, actually, in practice, this was what I was thinking, but in practice it makes more sense for you to start over there and then come over here. And then obviously I'm recalibrating my shots as that's happening, because the crew are about to walk on and I'm going to have to tell them what we're doing. It's also kind of that process of, if an actor feels something, I think because I came from an acting background, I think I've got some ability in recognizing what feels natural for them to play, and I think that helps. But I think sometimes if you've asked somebody to do something that just feels completely alien to them, because, for example, actually their character keeps their car keys on the left of the kitchen door, and you've imagined they were in the kitchen, or whatever that is, they all come in with that information and go, oh, I think it would make more sense if I came from here to here. And I go, cool. So we work flexibly together to build something that feels natural. And sometimes that means that I literally put my floor plan in the bin and go, okay, actually, let's just do this instead. And then sometimes then comes that really essential discussion with HODs of like, okay, I've changed my plan, so this is what I'm thinking now, but how does that play for you? What do you think? So that's again a time that you end up leaning, I think, a bit more on your HODs. Sometimes there's a really clear, solid plan, you just execute it, but sometimes you have kind of changes that feel better and like a best way of doing things, really, so you just adapt to that.
Do you have to say no to the actors sometimes because you're just like, that's just going to add too many shots? Like, does that happen?
Definitely.
Quite a bit?
I think not so much for people who've been on the show a long time, because they know how to truncate their action for different shots. And would it be easier if I actually played that line facing you rather than facing away, because that's going to add an extra shot, so that they already think like that, which is just incredible, really. But sometimes I think it's a process of negotiation, isn't it, always? And I think if I've got something that's really key because, for example, I'm going to shoot through an external window, so actually I really need them to come to the sink to play that line because that's for my shot, that's going to work. And it also is what helps break up kind of quite standard shooting style sometimes if you've got something, a moment like that you want to get. So yeah, I will absolutely be like, would you be willing to try this? You know, can we give it a go, see how it feels? If you can't make it work, we'll find a different plan. But to be flexible with it, but also to say, you know, the reason that I'm looking at that is because I'd love for you to end up there. So then it might be a different way of getting there. But yeah, I'll always try and work with what the actors feel is natural. But also if I've got something specific in mind, I'll also ask them to go with me and try that before we sort of make a decision.
I'm with you, because I know you mentioned as well that you feel like you've maybe become more adventurous over your time doing it. Can you think of any sort of specific examples of like things maybe you've done more recently that maybe you wouldn't have tried earlier on? Yeah,
totally. I think something that's really interesting about the way that Hollyoaks format works is that they have menu sequences at the beginning. So just like a menu, you can see what's on the menu for today, which characters are on the menu. So the menu scenes are often like 3 really short scenes that introduce the key storylines for the day or the key characters for the day. And those little scenes can be between 10 seconds and a minute, but usually they're about 30 seconds long. Sometimes we try and do those in one-shotters. So
nice.
We would try and kind of navigate how we're going to use track and dolly and try and work out, okay, so I'm going to start on this character, I'm going to pull them backwards, they're going to come with us, they're going to take us over to somebody else, then I'm going to pick them up, then they're going to take us there. So there's obviously quite a sequence involved in that. And I think, yeah, my brain, whether it's braver or just that I've got a better understanding of it now, of what makes sense and how to not use dead space in shots and how to make the frame really as full as possible. Yeah. So I think it's probably that my understanding of it's just grown as I've gone on, but those things feel much easier to plan now because I've got more experience of doing it, rather than at the beginning I was like, how am I going to get all these people in this one shot? And it doesn't, and then now it's things like, oh, well, why don't we put your phone there? You need to receive a text message in this menu. So let's like navigate all those story beats that need to be there, but making it kind of feel like it's got a flow and a dynamism to start the episode as well, rather than just a 1 minute scene of like somebody just doing a really simple action.
No, I'm with you. So it's sort of like evolving shots and stuff like that's really cool. You mentioned that the writers are freelance as well. So how does the process work? So they're brought on, I assume there is this great Hollyoaks Bible that everyone can read from, that's sort of got a history of like all the different storylines and stuff. But I imagine a lot of people actually like very familiar with the content anyway that work on it.
I think so. I mean, I think it's mostly that there's a pool of people, kind of similar to directors in a way, where there's obviously people who just come and do a couple of episodes or whatever. But in terms of like this, once you've obviously got a team of people who understand the show, it's great to go back to them because they can bring in more detail and nuance about the characters and the relationships, and they're not starting from scratch, which is obviously really hard for any department. And there's obviously a huge storyline department as well at Hollyoaks. So they obviously storyline and they write kind of the character arcs and the journeys and what needs to happen in each episode. So which beats are going to happen today, which beats are going to happen tomorrow. And then I don't actually know in terms of what the writers get given, but I think they get given a beat sheet in terms of like, these are the locations on offer, these are where these people live and work and all that kind of information. And can you bring these story beats into this episode, and then they work on obviously crafting that with the team. We do a page turn right at the beginning of the process. So after I've first read my scripts, we go into the office and do a page turn where we talk through each scene. And that's really crucial for me, because even if I've been away for 2 months or 3 months from the show, obviously huge amounts of story and plot have happened in that time. So I'm like, okay, so hang on a minute, let's go back. So this person was with this person and now they locked them in a cupboard, so they're not there anymore. Okay, fine, no worries. And then you're kind of you're trying to find out your backstory information as well to catch up. So that page turn day is really important for directors as well as writers. That's when we discuss the notes that are going to be passed back to the writers. And sometimes if I've got an idea, And I just might say something like, well, this scene feels a little inactive. It's two people sitting on a sofa, which we obviously try and avoid, although that happens in soap quite a lot. But, we're always trying to think of a more interesting way of doing something. So is there a world where these people could be walking through the market, having a coffee, having this discussion? So I might put forward a suggestion of location change or just something that's got a different action to it that I know is going to be more interesting and dynamic. So we kind of have that little process before the scripts go back to be redrafted, and then we get our shooting scripts after that.
Gotcha. Okay, so this happens. It's not a final script. It's a like work in progress script and stuff. And how far in advance before the shoot are you going through this?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Okay, gotcha.
That's when you get your scripts 2 weeks before this first shoot day.
And do you have any idea of what the episodes are going to be about in advance?
Nope.
No.
So you just pick them up on the read day and go, oh, right, cool, this is great.
Wow. Okay, gotcha. And have you been that read through? Is your first time seeing them? Have you got them like an hour before so you can like familiarise yourself? Or?
Yeah, you get a read day. So you get a day for yourself to just sit with the scripts and the stories and the characters and work through that on your own. And then you go into the page turn, basically. That's how they do it at Hollyoaks. Gotcha. I know it's different everywhere in terms of like when that happens. I think on some shows, they would then sort of stand you down for a couple of weeks while they redraft. But we basically just carry on preparing. So then I might start doing floor plans and things, but also there's a world where I go, oh, I think that scene's going to change because I've put forward an idea for it to change, but I don't have the actual scene to plan until that next draft is delivered. So it can also kind of, be, I guess it stalls the process in some way, but also you're ultimately going to get a better result out of it. So it's worth doing. But it's just, sometimes it means that your planning is, a few days before you're shooting. So it's quite intense in that period of prep. Yes.
No, I'm with you. Okay. So you've got it 2 weeks before, you're asking questions at this page turn thing. Are the scenes fairly immediate? Do you know what I mean by immediate in the sense of like, obviously I know you mentioned that you're sort of asking what the backstory is, like why is this sort of scene happening and stuff. Do the scenes very often, though, they're self-contained to some degree that you know what the emphasis or intention is of the scene? I suppose that's the point of the page turn day, right? It's because what you don't want to do is be on set and not really understand the purpose of a scene, I guess. I don't know. Could you just talk through, what that sort of... You're asking those questions... does it feel like you're trying to honour two things, or does it all feel like just one big story? Do you know what I mean? Are you trying to honour the scene and the backstory, or are you, just focusing on the more immediate drama and conflict that's taking place in each scene?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and I think everybody would probably answer that slightly differently. I think for me, I feel like the early stages of the process are for me to try and get close to the big idea for the week. Mm-hmm. So whatever that is, for example, there might not be something that unites all the storylines for the week. Of course, people are just on their individual journeys. There's going to be crossovers between characters, but, typically you've got your kind of A, B, and C thread for the week. So your A thread is the main storyline for the week where you're going to revisit the same characters, maybe in the same location, maybe in different locations. So then you've got your B thread, which is your next group of characters. So you've kind of got that formula is really helpful. It doesn't always play out like that. But for me, it's all about trying to understand. I'm basically working sort of from what I know is useful on set. So by the time I get to set, I got to know what's happening, what these people are kind of, what their dilemmas are, what their obstacles are, what they're going towards next, how we're going to play this. But I think you're absolutely right in using the word immediate, because particularly for continuing drama, it's an everyday storyline for this person. They're dealing with the here and now. So actually sometimes too much information about the past or the future isn't actually that helpful for the actors. That can be kind of confusing, because actually they don't need to think about what's coming next. They just need to play this scene, this moment to moment. And that's where we're working, is in that immediate realm. So for me, it's more about just knowing what's going to happen next so that I can kind of either help guide that story up to a point where, say, they need to finish the week on like a level 10 emotional intensity because they're going to have a breakdown at the start of next week. I need to be able to craft that with the actor to make sure that we leave it in the right place for next week. But sometimes it's not helpful to know story information about what's coming next for them, because actually it's more about playing the emotions and the urgency of the scene that we're in right now. So yeah, it's a balance between knowing that information and then going, okay, I need to know that, but I can then park that and I don't need to pass that on to them. That's just for my brain. And then, yeah, helping them play the immediacy is always that's always the crucial thing.
Amazing. Okay, so then between that second read, so that you've given your feedback, they then redo the script. There's then another read where they've applied those notes.
They just get issued really after that. Yeah, so
it's just issued.
That's when the scripts get issued. Yeah,
gotcha,
exactly that. And depending on the show, I mean, some shows have kind of minimal changes. I think Hollyoaks is kind of known for having sort of more script changes in terms of just the way the process is working at the moment. You might be getting line tweaks or even script changes the day before on the day of shooting.
Wow, okay.
That's happened before, just for various reasons, or something changes lunchtime. Something changes kind of in the week or before or after yours, and then there's a knock-on effect. So it's often that everything is planned and obviously detailed in advance, but sometimes something will just change in the week before story-wise, and then that's going to impact your scenes and how the characters are talking and that. So it just really depends on how closely linked they are with previous weeks and coming weeks as well in terms of their story.
Yeah. And then have you got the rest of the 2 weeks just to do your preparation? Is that 2 weeks you're hired for, or are you only sort of hired for like a few days out of those 2 weeks leading up to the
so it's the full 2 weeks, and that includes all of the prep. So you do your HOD meetings. So obviously if you're working on a basis of maybe roughly 20 scenes per episode, and you've got 3 episodes, you've got to come up with 60 floor plans. So you're floor planning in advance, you're writing down where the blocking's going to be, where the cameras are going to be. Everybody's used to that being flexible, so it's not that you're completely tied down to that, but it's just so that everybody has an idea of what they're working with. So for example, if you say, I really want this key light through this side of the building, and they look at that in advance and go, oh, okay, well, that's going to be an extra rig. So it's just it's to let people know about any big ideas. Really, everything else is kind of fluid. But in that 2 weeks, you're sort of looking at the new drafts of the scripts. You're having meetings with each of your departments to discuss big moments, to go through the script scene by scene and talk about design, costume, makeup, everything kind of within that. We agree in advance to an extent, and obviously you can have spontaneous ideas while you're shooting, and luckily lots of brilliant people will help you make that happen, but really it's your time to sort of develop those ideas and communicate them to the team in advance. And then in the second week of prep, you start to have your kind of final meetings towards the shoot. So you decide which cameras you're using, if you've got any which days in the schedule. If I want Steadicam for a particular day in the village, I need to let them know which day that's going to be, so everybody can book that and get that sorted. So you're coming closer and closer to the decisions as the shoot is approaching, basically.
Gotcha. And with those sort of because I know you mentioned you got limited time with a second camera, is that generally like multicam that's used for, or is it used to go and get like B-roll of other things? It's
multicam, it's absolutely multicam. Gotcha. We always keep the unit together pretty much. I think if you're on location, that might be slightly different, but it's always about more coverage of the same scene.
Yeah, okay, amazing. Okay, so then you've got all the stuff, you've had all this preparation, you've done floor plans, even though they might change and everything. You shoot the episode, it's in the can.
It's in the can. That was easy.
Whew. No pressure at all hunky-dory, it's all gone very well. What's the next step? Is there an editor's cut before you see it, or are you sitting with the editor the whole time? How does the whole post-production process sort of work on it?
Yeah, so at Hollyoaks, it's there's an assembly cut done for you by some brilliant editors who usually just do a fantastic job, which makes life a lot easier. And then you get 3 days with the editor to look at the 3 episodes. And it depends kind of also, obviously, along the way, we're trying to shoot 20 minutes of content, between 18 and 20 minutes of content. Sometimes the scripts run long. So on my last block, I ended up shooting 25 minutes for one episode. And so a big part of the edit process for that episode was trying to reduce that by 5 minutes, which obviously is a huge amount of content.
Yeah, it's a big percentage. Do you know what I mean? Like that's a big percentage of the story. Did you flag that it might run long from this script?
Yeah. All the time I'm saying, this is too long. Can we have some cuts, please?
Yeah.
Anyway, but sometimes for whatever reason, everybody would rather just shoot it and look at it later and kind of go, okay, let's work out in the edit which bits we really need, which bits we don't need. Sometimes it's because you've had a new scene and added and after the page turn, and that might actually be sort of doing something too similar to another scene, so you might lose one of them, but you just want to see which one, you know, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I do think the less wastage the better, in terms of kind of, obviously that's pretty much an extra shoot day sometimes, 5-6 minutes, so of course we don't want to be shooting unnecessary material, but I think also sometimes it gives you a bit of wiggle room as the director in the edit to be like, actually, you know, let's cut the fat of this scene, let's really trim it down, let's make it super efficient. You know, Hollyoaks style is quite fast paced, so the actors might play it in a certain rhythm. Sometimes that rhythm and that pause really works. Sometimes you want to chop a lot of the pauses out in the edit, so actually having some time to play with can be really useful in the storytelling as well.
Have you ever ended up with an episode that's too short and you're having to put pauses back in?
Yeah, I actually had to put another whole scene in, so I had to go back out and go back out into the real world. And it's that thing, I don't know if you find this, but once you've moved on to the edit, you've kind of mentally moved on from the shoot, and then they put you back onto a shoot.
It's like a physical thing as well. It's like, we can't go back out there.
Totally that. And then you have to go back out there and you're like, what is this strange world I was in 3 days ago? And so then, sometimes you have to shoot something additional, but then obviously that wasn't in the original thread of the storyline, so you're trying to then make the story that sits either side of it navigate that new scene. So it's just a process of that kind of refining and tweaking and finding the best way to tell those key stories. So is it exactly 20 minutes that each episode has to be? Is that or is there some wiggle room? There's a wiggle room because of, at the beginning of the episode, they have a section called Previously On, which is where they show some moments from previous episodes.
And that's where the real padding and shrinking is.
Totally that. And I think, also things just play differently sometimes. You know, the script supervisors do an amazing job of timing the scenes before we play them, but sometimes it's a really dramatic scene and the dialogue plays much slower. So actually, it's not that we've written too much material, it's just that something's played out slower on the floor, and then, you know, you're just constantly trying to harness it and bring it back. But I'll be checking the daily timings anyway that gets sent round, so that I know when we're shooting, that episode's already running 3 minutes over and I haven't even shot half of it yet. So then those are the points at which you're sort of flagging that as well with people, just so that they're aware that there's too much material. So if they can make cuts before you shoot, then that can make life easier as well.
Gotcha. So you mentioned that you got 3 days to go through 3 episodes. It's sort of an episode a day to sort of make those changes and stuff. Do you get sent a copy of it in advance so you can build your notes before you sit with the editor, or you're seeing it there that morning? And sort of, is it generally that night you're like, okay, well, let's definitely get 1 episode done today and 1 episode done tomorrow? Or does some episodes sometimes just naturally take longer and sort of eat up more time?
I think I tend to do, I think everybody's probably different, but I tend to try and work all 3 at the same time, because you're kind of maneuvering a story for the week as well. So for me, I would do 1 pass on all the episodes, maybe on the first day if we've got time, or we work through maybe 2 episodes on the first day, then the next morning we work on the 3rd, and then I'll often ask for a copy of where we've got up to be sent to me at home, so I can just process it in my own time, have another watch, is that thing working, you know, and so that therefore the time in the room with the editor is maximized, really, because that's is such essential time, as you know. And it's it kind of is a process of doing a few passes on it, I think, in terms of finding the best way. And actually, when you watch something back, you might have been really wedded to something that you shot and you're like, oh, that line, it was just such a great line. The editor's cut it out and you haven't actually noticed, you know. So it's also a process of working with that other creative brain. Because they've got the fresh eyes that you haven't got because you've been in the thick of it with everybody. So the process, whatever the editor brings to it, I always find such a helpful part of the process, because they're seeing it for the first time from purely a story perspective, where you might have been invested in a particular moment because it was really nice, that shot, but actually we don't need it now. We just need the story. No, of course. Wow, I think so. In terms of total time, so you've got sort of 3 days for the 3 episodes. What is that total shoot duration block? I know you mentioned that you should be doing almost like quite a few scenes a day. Is it? What is the total shoot time for the 10 days usually, 9 or 10 days.
Okay.
But I mean, we tend to go over that. To be honest. It tends to run longer, sometimes because of scheduling, in terms of this particular character might be really in demand at the moment, so everybody's trying to get them onto the board, everybody's trying to get their time with them. So it's usually around 10 days. Sometimes you end up that's your main block where you've got the same crew for the 10 days, ideally, unless people are taking holiday. But then after that, you do pick-up days. So any scenes that don't fit into the 10 days, they kind of assemble a crew for you of people that you haven't worked with. So that's a kind of different challenge, because obviously there's an investment in the story and the block from the main crew. And then when you get to pick-up days, you're then carrying a lot of that almost continuity, but it's not continuity because you've got those notes and pictures and stuff, but in terms of like, oh, that's where they came from, this story, this scene is about this, and the people coming into it just fresh on it, they don't really get much prep time for pickup days. So it kind of, you're trying to, sometimes you're doing your biggest stuff without your main crew, and that can happen as well.
So how small is the crew on pickup days, and how big is sort of the crew on sort of regular days?
So same size, but just different people. So I think typically the pickup crews are freelancers, and the kind of main body of the crew are staff at Hollyoaks. So that's kind of how it works. So you might be working with somebody you've never worked with before. Your DOP is completely brand new to you that morning, and you kind of just have to dive in. And it's very like indie filmmaking is, in a way where you actually don't really get a lot of prep time, and you kind of have to dive in and just work with what you've got.
Get your wellies on.
Exactly. Always have a pair of wellies in the boot of the car.
So do you get to choose your sort of HODs? No, not at all. It's completely allocated for you. But gotcha. I mean, luckily, everybody there is so brilliant that you kind of end up working with people, multiple times. Sometimes they're on rotation with different directors. So sometimes you get the same crew again, which is really lovely. Sometimes people are on rotation together. But I mean, to be honest, everyone, when you get your crew list through, you look at it and go, oh, brilliant. No matter who it is, I was thinking that's probably, like, for a film when it's almost like each project is a one and done, that's one thing. But I guess if it is this sort of ongoing system of making episodes, that probably sounds like a much nicer way of doing it, because it stops it being cliquey. It means there's sort of like, it's one big family creating it, rather than people building up their own micro families within the wider umbrella. I don't know. Is that how you see it, or?
Yeah, totally. I think that's exactly it. And I think it's a funny thing, isn't it? Because it's a bit of a cliche to be like, we're just one big family. But also, you're working with people day in, day out. People have sometimes got to go and get their kids from school. Everybody's got real lives. Whereas I think in the indie sphere, I've certainly found that, like, when you're on a project, you're expected to commit to it, whatever the hours, whatever the times. But it's just different when you're on a rolling model, because obviously that's not sustainable. So you are working standard hours. You're on set for 8, you're finished by 6:30 so that you can de-rig for 7. Those are the hours, and everybody has lives outside that. So it's also, for you coming in as a freelancer, you're like, oh, I just want to get this extra shot. And, sometimes everybody will be absolutely lovely and go, yeah, okay, fine, 10 minutes more, that's absolutely fine. But you have to be mindful as well that, like, you're just coming into this for, however long the whole process is, 8 weeks, and then you're out again, but they're doing this on rotation again and again. And as you know, like, shooting is exhausting back to back. So you're trying to preserve people's mental energy as well.
Yeah. Wow. God, that's quite nice hours, actually. It's like, I guess it needs to be in a way when it's that, like, the process is repeated that many times, it has to be sustainable, right? Yeah. Like, you can't sort of, if people are crashing and burning the whole time, then it's sort of like a different,
I think so. Thing. I mean, I think there's a pretty much, there's always going to be a bit of that in this industry as well, because of the intensity that it demands. But I think that's what, people who are working as staff at studios, they do have annual leave. They have those different benefits to what freelancers get. And also sometimes, I just went and did some work on one of the night shoots that was working 4 till 4.
How did you find night shoots? Because I know about night shoots.
I'm sure you know. I'm sure you've been there. You've got the dark circles. No, it's funny how your body just kicks into, oh, this is the start of a work day, even if it's whatever time of night it is. But I just think there's a different challenge when it gets to like 1 a.m. Everybody's drained.
Yes.
There's not enough bars of chocolate to go around. You get into that situation where you obviously always have those days where you have to really rally people. But I think, I think that's just when you're on location, so you haven't got the comfort of the studio and the canteen and the toilets. You've got everything is out in a big car park somewhere. I think it's just a different challenge, and it's exciting because you get to go out and have something different to the everyday, which I think really breaks it up as well. But also you've got that challenge of kind of, okay, it's 3 a.m. and I've really got to ask people to push now for the next hour because we've got one scene left, and all of that usual challenge.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, because the one thing I quite liked about night shoots, I don't know how you find it, but like for me, I felt like I got a morning, whereas on a normal shoot, you know, you're starting so early and you just got to get up, ready and there. Whereas suddenly, like, I don't know, I've never managed to sleep in all the way to like an hour or two before the night shoot begins. So then suddenly I'm like, oh my God, I've got like 3 hours to go and do what I want, you know, whereas sometimes at the end of a shoot day, you're just knackered, so you're not really going to go and do much with your evening. But you're more likely to do something with your shoot morning if it's a night shoot. I don't know, I guess.
Yeah, totally. Like I'm exactly the same as you. Yeah, I wish I could do like a 10-hour block of sleep, but that just doesn't happen for me. No. So I'm already awake at whatever time. I've had 5 hours. I'm like, well, that'll have to do, and here we go again. So yeah, it's I think it's just a different rhythm, isn't it? And I think, you know, I find particularly because I still work in theatre as well and do kind of cross-genre projects that my hours change all the time. So I have to be kind of I have to try and be a human and be awake at the right time and do the right thing for that particular project, but that can change from week to week. So it's also kind of, you get used to it, don't you? But it's the adapting to, you know, I'm not somebody that ever would have really suited kind of a 9 to 5, but I think there is something about that stability and regularity for your body where you're kind of like, oh, I should be asleep now, I should be awake now, whereas mine just sort of changes.
100%. Okay, so then the edit's all done, everything's sorted. Is there a sound step to the process, or is the sound done without you? What's sort of the final step before, I guess, you sit down and watch it on your own sofa? If you sit down and watch it on your own sofa, I know that maybe some people don't want to watch their own stuff as much. But
that's true. So really, I mean, I think most of the kind of sound dub music mix, that all happens kind of after you, but obviously you're putting in a version of what you want into your cut as well. So what happens at the end of those 3 days is that on the 4th day, or kind of whenever the next day of work is, you sit down and do a viewing with the producers and with somebody from the script team. And so you sit and watch the episodes with them, at which point you're obviously trying not to completely obsess over how they're reacting to them and whether they're enjoying them.
That must be so nerve-wracking the first time that happened, especially, right?
Honestly, it's really difficult because I think, do you know what? I think it's difficult every time because every block has those kind of unanswered questions, for me anyway, of kind of, maybe you get more confident as time goes on, but I think there's always that moment of kind of, did I get that tone right? Is that the story that I've achieved that they wanted? You know, I always want to do a good job, obviously, and to present the show that they are hoping for, and to find moments to surprise people and do those things as well. So yeah, for me, that review is really important, but it's also quite nerve-wracking. But then as soon as somebody hopefully laughs in like the first couple of minutes, you go, okay, fine, you know, we're on side and we're heading in the right direction. There's always going to be notes and continuity things that come up. Sometimes you have reshoots, depending on if something major the week beforehand has changed, and you then have a knock-on effect on your week. You know, all of that stuff can happen as well. But really, after you've done that executive viewing, you sort of say thanks very much and off you go back to your life. And the next time you see it's on TV, exactly. Pick up your paycheck on the way out and off you go. So it's and then the next time you see it's on TV. So I think I viewed my last block of episodes. I think we viewed just at the very end of January, and they've just aired on TV last week. So it's kind of an 8-week process. Sorry. So when did the episode finish? It locked, and then when did it air? What was that time difference? So I think it locked on the 28th of January, if I remember, and then the first episode aired on the 10th of March. So actually not even as long as that. It used to be 8 weeks, but I think the process has kind of shortened recently. That's because that's not much time or wiggle room. That feels like there's a constant gentle pressure. Do you know what I mean? It's like, totally, if something goes wrong, there's not much room for something to go wrong, you know? Absolutely. And I think as well, that's also how the shows try to stay current, how continuing drama tries to stay current, because you don't want to be so far behind the curve that what you're doing is kind of out of date by the time it airs. Of course, So it's kind of a balance between that. But I would say there's always a healthy level of pressure. And I think you'd be mad to try and work in this job if you couldn't handle that kind of pressure, because it's always there, whether it's a pressure of delivery on you as the director, whether it's a pressure of people, having real lives and dealing with things on set and in work, and you have to help manage that and try and still shoot the show and get the show done. And, there's always a level of pressure, but I think I think as a person, you have to be somebody who kind of thrives on that rather than is frightened by it, because that just wouldn't help you, I think, if you were in that environment every day. For
sure. I mean, in terms of like staying current as well, I was thinking, are they sort of like putting some 6-7 jokes and stuff in there just to
totally
yeah
all of that. It's very especially particularly for Hollyoaks, because the kind of target market is like under 34s in terms of the audience, so particularly those kind of trends and things, you'll see that cropping up, or maybe even topics and issues that are hot topics at the moment. You'll start to see that creep into a storyline. And so it really is about staying kind of present and current and feeling like we know these people because they live in the world that we live in. That's a really important connection for the audience.
Yeah, no, of course. Okay, well, just before we sort of move on to our last couple of questions, I wondered if you could sort of tell us about what you've noticed is sort of the biggest differences between working in this world and the other worlds you've worked in. Obviously, you've done some incredible work in theatre as well. I know you travel with the National Theatre.
So I was the resident director on Ocean at the End of the Lane, which was an amazing show. And then, I've just worked as a camera director on one of their NT at Home captures for a show as well. That'll be coming out soon. So that's a really different challenge, but it's all the same skills. I mean, it's the same as actors working on TV and then working in a theatre job. And, the same for you and across the different projects you do as well. It's all the same skills. It's just about adapting the process, and the timeline and the speed, I think, is where you see the biggest difference, and the level of preparation. So, what you have to go in with and what you can find time. Sometimes in theatre, it depends really on the project, but sometimes you've got more time to sort of find the show with everybody in the room. You've obviously got your concepts kind of going in, whereas really you need to have your plan for TV before you turn up. That's really on you to provide that information for everybody. So it's just really different in terms of what's required of you at different points in the process, but really it's all the same skills. And if you can do one, I really firmly believe you can do another. I know people like to box people into kind of, you are a comedy director, you are this, you are that, but I don't really find that very helpful, because I think creativity is limitless, and that you can absolutely apply your skills from one to the other.
Absolutely. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I feel like it's often the lack of imagination from either like execs, or the execs fear how they pitch you to the money people, that stops that from happening. Whereas like if you can deliver certain things, like those skills are so transferable, do you know what I mean, across
totally
a lot of these fields, and certainly like even what you're talking about in terms of like genre, completely. And I completely agree. I think it's a lot of it is based on fear, but also it's based on competition. There's a lot of us working in the industry, and how do you separate people? Well, actually, that person's got a proven track record of doing X, Y, and Z, so let's get them to do this really similar thing again, because we know they can do that. That's how you end up sort of playing James Bond type characters, isn't it, for your whole career, even if you're actually a really versatile actor. So it's the same for everybody, I think, but it's also, for me, it's part of what I love about it is the variety of being able to work with, and then work with young people, teach, do that kind of work as well. It's all super important to me, because that variety and creativity, it all feeds each other. So you might be taking a lesson from, I did some work recently for the Wrexham Academy of Screen Acting, so I was like back working in that sort of teacher role, and that's really exciting, because then you go back onto set and you go, oh yeah, I did this great thing in a workshop the other night, I'm going to use it on set, and it all kind of, it's like cross-pollinates, doesn't it, the work that you do. So no, 100%. Like it's all that sort of like same muscle, that like responding and problem solving, and trying to build some kind of like narrative story out of what you're sort of given in a way. So the last two questions that we always ask all our guests is, what were you doing in your teenage years that turn out to be useful now, and what advice would you give to teenage you if you could travel back in time?
They're great questions. I mean, watching Hollyoaks actually turned out to be pretty useful in the end for me.
Time well spent.
And then you're working with people you used to watch on telly when you were a teenager, which is quite funny. But that's a bit of a full circle. So surreal, really surreal at the beginning, and then by the end of it, you're sort of like, you count them as friends, and that's
like, come on, Karen, hurry up.
Exactly.
I just made up a name. I don't know the cast of.
Karen's a nightmare. I think for me, I mean, I was thinking about this a little bit, obviously, because you sort of mentioned these questions in advance, and I think something that was useful for me was that I didn't know that I was going to end up in this career. I didn't plan it. I didn't think this has to be the job that I do. I kind of was working originally as an actor. I knew I was a storyteller. I knew I was absolutely fascinated by other worlds. I was watching a lot of films. I was reading a lot of books. I was using it as a bit of escapism, I guess, in my teenage years. And I think that real kind of detailed love of storytelling has ended up really carrying me to where I am now, kind of accidentally, actually. But I think a lot of the stuff I was doing, I was kind of accidentally honing the skills that I use now. So it wasn't necessarily, I did quite a lot of Amdram as an actor and, was doing sort of plays all the time, but they weren't like, the incredible classical texts of Britain's history. It was just kind of random stuff. And actually sometimes working on stuff where the scripts aren't as perfect has then helped me, I think, later on when I've been in that situation professionally. And I think for me, the most important thing was that I didn't treat it as a job too early, because I think there's just increasing pressure on young people today to decide what they want to do, how they want to do it, and to start making content or being that professional, younger and younger. And that's kind of course, you get lots of really successful child actors and that go on to have fabulous careers as well. But I think it's about just really enjoying whatever it is that you're into. And just if you're interested in film or you're interested in TV or theatre, just try and consume as much of it as you can, because the more different styles that you see of how people do things differently, the more you can start to find out what you find interesting and what your voice could be in that space as well. And I think, ultimately all of us as individuals, our identity plays a huge part in the work that we end up making and the teams that we assemble. And I think the more you kind of just enjoy being in that space and watching and consuming, rather than worrying too much about making and showing and making it professional and monetizing it and all those things. I actually think some of the work that I did when I worked in bars and pubs have really, really helped me manage big teams on set. It's those kind of environments, actually, they're very fast paced and they involve a lot of problem solving, and it's not that dissimilar from the TV environment. So I think it's all about kind of just not putting pressure on yourself to have too much kind of intensity when you're younger, and to enjoy what you're doing and find the things that you love and that you're drawn to, that help clarify what your voice is and what you might want to say. And I think that goes for the advice that I would give myself as well, is to kind of take your time and not worry. It's not a linear career path where you do this thing, then you move on to this thing, and then you move on to that thing. It happens so differently for everybody, and to not put pressure on yourself to have all the answers straight away. You'll figure it out as you go.
Yeah, amazing. Eleri, thank you so much for your time. This has been absolutely amazing. Thank you, and hope to speak to you soon.
Thank you for having me. Definitely.